Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another free webinar from the Smith School of Business. My name is Meredith Dalt, and I'm a business journalist at Smith School of Business at Queen's University in Kingston, and I will be your moderator for today's discussion on making the side hustle work, how to become an entrepreneur while holding down a corporate job. Today, we'll be talking about the pros and the cons of the side hustle, about how to launch and run a business while working from home, and how to know when to quit your day job and take that business full-time. And as always, today's webinar is presented by Smith Business Insight and by Queen's Executive Education. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. I want to remind you that this hour-long discussion is going to be recorded. You will be getting a link to that recording by email in a couple of days. And most importantly, if you want to ask a question over the course of our discussion, which I hope you will, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. As those questions come in, we'll try to get to them, but get them in early and often, and then your odds of getting your question answered are a little bit higher, but we'll try to get to as many as we can over the course of our hour. So back to side hustles. A recent survey by RBC revealed that 74% of Canadian small business owners and entrepreneurs are keen to start a side hustle, and that is largely attributed to the increased cost of living. The number among Gen Z entrepreneurs is even higher, coming in at 84% of respondents. And the news is good for those embarking on side hustles, with a recent research indicating that devoting even minimal hours to a venture can bring in solid annual earnings. Well, to unpack these ideas and more, I'm joined by a panel of people who know a thing or two about side hustling. Nuša Fain is an adjunct assistant professor at Smith School of Business, where she's also the director of the Master of Management, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship program. She has extensive consulting experience in the field of product development and innovation management, working with a wide variety of firms in the oil and gas, manufacturing, and retail sectors. She holds a PhD in mechanical engineering from the University of Ljubljana, where she focused on process management within innovative organizations. Kristi Soomer is the founder and CEO of Encircled, a Canadian-made line of versatile, sustainable clothing designed to help women streamline their wardrobes. Inspired by her love of travel and dislike for checking a bag, Kristi started Encircled in 2012 when she was working as a management consultant and traveling more than 100,000 miles a year. In 2014, she left her corporate job to open Encircled's first studio space. Since then, Kristi has grown Encircled into a seven-figure business that was named a certified B Corp in 2018. She holds an accelerated MBA from Smith School of Business. And finally, Connor O'Shea is the president and co-founder of Westgen Technologies, Inc. He is a mechanical engineer with more than a decade of experience working for Shell Canada, where he built expertise in planning, project management, and economic assessment. In 2019, he founded Westgen Technologies, an emission reduction solution company with the purpose of empowering the energy evolution. Westgen's ePod technology is deployed across North America and is eliminating more than 100,000 tons of CO2 emissions annually. He holds an executive MBA from Smith School of Business and Cornell University. Thank you all for being here today. Sorry for that many words to get us started, but I'm hoping we can jump right into the conversation. So it always helps to kind of set the stage. Let's get an overview. I'm going to start with Nuša. So you're director of the MMIE program at Smith, which is a Master's Innovation and Entrepreneurship program. You work with a lot of early stage entrepreneurs. Why do you think we're seeing more side hustles right now?
So hi, Meredith. Thank you for having me here. There's a variety of reasons, right? So one, your Gen Z and gig economy have been kind of the thing that has changed the way we look at things. And other trends like COVID, we're reassessing how we want to live, work, and what we want to do. So side hustles, right? Doing an additional thing next to your full-time job is sometimes comes out of necessity. It's interesting to note that about 58% of all worldwide gig economy is actually ride sharing. So people start to do Uber driving out of necessity, right? That's one side of the side hustle. But I think the one we're talking about here today is people identifying either a problem that they've had that they want to solve and are passionate about, or wanting to do something with purpose. So most of the companies that kind of launch from our MMIE program actually focus on something people are excited about, something that they want to pursue, solve a problem for somebody.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Thanks. And so that gets me to go right to Kristi to say, tell me your story, because I have a feeling yours is probably aligned with what Nuša just said.
Yeah. So the long and the short of it is that I used to be in corporate management consulting. So after Queens, I kind of bounced around a little bit in CPG and then moved to strategy consulting. Loved it, but the lifestyle is really difficult. And also you have to be really smart about packing because you're living on a plane. So I was in airports pretty much every single week and really challenged to pack in a small bag for corporate meetings, dinners, going out with the colleagues and stuff like that. And I got inspired to create a product idea called the Chrysalis Cardi, which we still have today. It's basically a convertible scarf dress garment. Keep in mind, I have no fashion background. I would not even call myself a fashion designer at this point in the game either, but I really felt called to this product. It was innovative, it was new, it was fresh. I Googled, there was nothing out there. And at the time, I was also looking for more values alignment in what I was doing personally in my career as well. So I was wanting to focus more on sustainability and ethics in business. I was in retail, but I was maybe not necessarily working with merchants who embodied those values. And I wanted my career to line up with that. So essentially, I started it as a side hustle, literally working, evenings and weekends on it. And at some point it just became too big. So it was really difficult to manage both because being a management consultant, you're already working 60, 70, 80 hours a week and traveling most of that time. So there's a certain point where you hit that juncture where you can't do both. And I had to choose, but it was really driven by a product idea and the passion for that product and the passion for my alignment with my values as well.
Okay, I'll get you to continue the next part of the story in a moment. I just quickly want to say, so that the first garment that you designed that inspired your company, was that literally you said, I need a garment that's going to work, and you cut a piece of fabric to make it work? And then
yes,
it was that
it's that bad. Yeah. I live near Queen Street West in Toronto. I bought fabric. I bought a sewing machine off of Craigslist. I broke it the first time I used it. Like I literally sewed it together in my living room floor. So it was really that grounds up side hustle. And eventually, obviously, we don't sew them today in my studio and stuff like that. But I really started from the bottom up with that business.
What a fantastic story. And Connor, why don't you tell us, so how did yours come about, your company come about?
Sure. So in my case, I've always been interested in entrepreneurship. And in fact, in junior high school, I opened a store in my locker and ended up getting so popular that the school shut me down because it was taking business away from their canteen. So I think I've always had the bug. I did work at Shell, and I did at a certain point, aspire to have a career where I progressed through the levels at Shell. But when I studied the MBA in 2015 at Queens, I think that probably reignited my passion. And then when I finished that MBA, I realized that I had run out of excuses not to start a business. And it was either that I wasn't going to do it ever or I had to do it now. So I actually didn't have a business to start. So I started by looking for business partners, ended up figuring out that my brother-in-law, so my wife's brother, had similar aspirations. And we got together. We actually took inspiration from a Queen's case study that features Michelle Romanoff and when she started her first business. And we made a spreadsheet and we listed every idea that we had and we weighed pros and cons and used that to choose what we were going to do. My best idea on there was importing Japanese toilet seats. I'm glad we didn't go with that one in the end. My business partner, Ben, was a facilities engineer in oil and gas, and he had identified this significant environmental impact that was happening related to these pneumatic devices that are operating in oil and gas well sites. Pneumatic device, for anyone who's not familiar with that, an example is an air gun in a mechanic's garage. Normally they use compressed air. In oil and gas, we don't have compressed air because we're in the middle of nowhere. There's no power source. So we use the compressed natural gas that's coming out of the well to actuate these devices. But then the gas vents into the atmosphere and the gas is composed primarily of methane. So it's a really significant greenhouse gas impact. Anyway, he had been an engineer designing sites for clients in some of these regions. And one of them at a certain point had a fire on their site related to this gas emitting from a device. An operator got injured and they asked Ben to design a site that didn't vent gas. And this was before we really were talking about the environmental impact of these devices. So Ben set out to do that and he found that there was no good power generation solution to actually run an air compressor to eliminate these emissions. And so in 2018, when we were making this list, that was one of the ideas that made its way onto the list. And at the same time, the Alberta energy regulator here announced they were changing the rules. And starting in 2022, you weren't going to be allowed to build new sites that had these emissions anymore. So when that happened, Ben and I said, okay, let's see if we can solve this problem. And we set out to develop a new way to generate power in a remote application. And we spent about a year studying power generation. We ended up taking inspiration from hybrid cars, and we realized that, if a battery can power a car, why can't it power a well site? So we developed this design concept around a set of batteries powering a site, continuously charging those batteries with solar, and then having an internal combustion engine that is basically a glorified battery charger to run if there was 3 feet of snow on the solar panels, for example, which happens sometimes in Canada. So we came up with this idea, and by the spring of 2019, we thought the idea was going to have legs. So we did the stereotypical entrepreneur thing, and we sold all of our assets and mortgaged our houses and pooled our money and financed the prototype, the construction of a prototype unit. We built the prototype that summer and got it working, and we ended up selling the prototype in the fall for a small profit. And it was, it was that was kind of the beginning of getting the snowball rolling down the hill.
Fantastic. What a good story, and so different in so many ways from Kristi's. Kristi, I want to go back to you just to take us through part B of your story. So how long was your journey from cutting things out on your living room floor to actually quitting your job and launching this business, which I understand is quite a successful one at this point?
Yeah, so it was almost exactly 2 years. So I'm actually coming up on my 8-year anniversary of quitting my full-time job, which is very exciting, and almost 10 years in the business in totality. So for a fashion business, that's pretty good longevity there. So yeah, it was about 2 years that I was working on the side with it, primarily mostly on weekends and sometimes on evenings and stuff like that. Obviously, when you're working full-time, you have to be really strategic with your schedule and also really honor your commitments to your full-time job and be respectful of your employer as well. So it only leaves you so much time to work on your kind of side gig, if you will. So yeah, that's kind of the timeline where it took me. And I would say what I said to Robert in like the pre-interview for this is that I actually quit my job 3 times in the year when I was thinking I was going to quit. And, not every entrepreneur is super, jump in the net will appear. And I'm definitely not that person. I'm very conservative when it comes to that. I do not come from an entrepreneurial family, nor was I operating a store out of my locker like Connor. I'm definitely a corporate person. That's my mentality. So for me, it was a really hard decision to quit my job. I'd also obviously invested in a lot of education and gotten into my supposedly dream job. So making that leap was really scary. So I did do it. I quit the first time and my company, my manager talked me back in. I quit the second time and the president called me and said, do you really want to start your own business? These are the pros and cons. And he talked me out of it. And then the third time they were like, all right, you can go. And they threw me like a lovely going away party. So it was quite nice.
And that's great. And then how quickly were you able to ramp it up?
Honestly, pretty much immediately. Once I was full-time in the business, it started to take off because, again, I was able to put more of my efforts into marketing and social media and digital marketing and all that kind of stuff and production and design. And I think I hired my first employee we took on a small equity placement probably within a couple months after that, and then hired my first employee and started to pay myself, I think, a little bit, not a lot, within probably about 4 or 5 months.
Well, that's fantastic. Oh, you guys have such great stories. Nuša, I want to bring you back in here listening to Kristi and to Connor. What does it make you think about, in terms of the challenges that can come up for people when they're trying to grow their business on the side? And how do you overcome those kinds of challenges?
So it's a really interesting point that Kristi made, right? So the first thing we say in our MMIE program, whenever we go into launching ventures, is don't quit your day job just yet, right? And so I think, Kristi, even though you say you're very corporate, I would assume entrepreneurship is actually part of your thing as well, because you made it happen, but you took the strategic approach. And that's what I think the important thing is, figuring out, right? And that's the challenge. At what point am I stable enough for what I think stability needs to be for myself to really dig into it? And so the first challenge people face is, okay, so how long do I make it a side hustle? Because it does take time from, you know, your other obligations, your family, your friends, your wellness for that matter, right? So one thing is identifying at what point in time do I really want to go doing this full time. The other piece is losing that piece of control. So when it really takes off, you have the credibility, you're making money, you're able to pay yourself, right? And you get your first employee. A lot of founders really struggle with that, and you showed it, right? Kind of hockey stick growth, when now the venture's taking off, but I don't have full control anymore. Because side hustles, the beauty of them is you have full control, you know, the full process, right? Kristi was sitting in her living room cutting stuff. Connor was going, and I totally want to talk to Connor, by the way, about the whole compressor thing. Just the professional kind of dysfunction that I have. He was building
mechanical
stuff.
engineers, brains together.
Yes. So this conversation could totally go to a different tangent, but you know, they went and built it, and they played with it, and they showed it, and they had full control of everything that kind of wanted to be in there. And as you grow the side hustle, you lose that control. And that is probably one of the biggest challenges. And then the one that people kind of are addressing in a couple of questions popping up, the conflict of interest, right? So there's kind of research within the space saying that if your side hustle is something completely different from what you're doing in your full-time job, there's actually a greater chance for you to succeed and actually bring positive impacts into your full-time job as well. Whereas if they kind of align, right, you're doing a similar thing, and it is possible because sometimes companies allow similar things to happen, you kind of lose the boundary between my full-time job, my side hustle, my life. So that's the other challenge, taking the step back and just saying, today I'm going to breathe.
Well, actually, let's just go to Matthew's question. So how do we minimize or avoid conflict of interest with our current employers? And most importantly, we may not want our employers to know we are starting a side hustle. So I ask you, Connor, Kristi, at what point, I mean, Kristi, obviously at some point you told your employer. Connor, how were you navigating that space while you were still employed?
I think it is a very sensitive topic. And one thing I think that's really important is, as an entrepreneur, your relationships and your reputation are really all you have, because you don't have a big organization or a track record if you're a first-time entrepreneur. So it's really important that you don't burn bridges and that you're seen as being, you know, having integrity. I'd say for us, what I did was I didn't, you know, I did it in my evenings and weekends. I didn't talk about it at work. And I tried not to interfere with my job for quite a while. The business that we were starting was not related to my job at Shell. So that if it was, I think that would be a much more complex situation that you'd have to navigate. And I can't really talk to that. But because it was different, I didn't feel bad about not talking about it. But just I'll share my timing on when I left, because it kind of came up. For me, we were starting to see that this could have legs, and at the same time I had my daughter was due to be born in the spring of 2019, my first daughter, and Shell had just announced a generous parental leave policy, and at the same time, you know, some of my restricted RSUs were vesting, and there's all kinds of things, and the timing actually just like the stars aligned for me. And it was like, I have a window. And so that's how I knew, for me, was the timing was because there was a window and I knew there would never be another window. And I remember the day I realized that. It was one of the happiest days of my life. And I had this giant smile on my face because I knew that I was going to make the leap. And it actually was a day that I realized that I had more fear about staying in my current job and not ever realizing my aspirations than I had about leaving my job. Once I realized that, I actually did bring it to Shell and I said, hey, I'm going to take a parental leave. I want to be completely transparent. I'm going to try to start a business on my parental leave. And they said, is the business related to what you're doing with us right now? And I said, no. And they said, okay, that's no problem. We support you and we wish you the best. So I was very fortunate in that I had a window and I had support from my organization. I didn't have to compromise my integrity.
That's really excellent. That's really useful advice. Thank you. Kristi, did you want to weigh in there? Did you have anything similar or no?
Yeah, so I had, for sure, this is something that's a little bit of a sticky situation. So my business was like maybe a little bit tangential to what I was doing because I was consulting for retailers. Granted, they were billion-dollar retailers on the other side of the spectrum, usually, of what I was creating. But when I was at PwC before I joined ThoughtWorks, which was my last employer, it was tricky, to be honest, because I was getting PR opportunities with Encircled to go on TV. And then also I was in the media for PwC. So I had to tell them at some point that you might see me on TV, but I wouldn't go on TV during work hours. So I would take vacation time and stuff like that. I wish I had that kind of window to do that, but I ended up working full-time throughout. So I would just use my vacation time to, do things that I knew had to be like business focused, especially if they were public facing. And they were supportive of that. At ThoughtWorks, I did have to tell them they're a very entrepreneurial organization as well. So they were really supportive of that. I think they're used to that in their business. But I would always recommend check with, a couple of things if you're not sure. Number one, check with your employment contract and speak to an employment lawyer if you're not sure, because some businesses have like no moonlighting clauses. So you want to be sure that you're not violating a contract agreement. And then, yes, always be respectful to your employer. And, they are the one paying your salary at the end of the day. So we want to give them the best time and the best efforts to, and they can tell, like as an employer, I can tell when somebody's not engaged in the business. It's very obvious. I think you always want to be respectful to the employer, but I was very lucky that I never had any negative pushback on it, but it did feel awkward when my colleagues were like, I saw you on CH11 morning show. And I'm like, oh God. Oh no. So I have had those moments. So it's often better to just get ahead of it versus have somebody surprisingly find out about you later on doing this thing on the side.
Yeah, that makes sense. Super good advice. Sorry, Connor. Yeah.
I think I'll just throw in one more thought. I think if you've got a good relationship with your boss, and if it's a good leader, most people are supportive of other people when they see that somebody is really just trying to truly follow their passion and do something that they feel some purpose around. I think most people don't actually want to get in the way of that. And so my guess is that the reception would be better than most people think if you present it as, hey, this is something that I really truly feel like I just have to do. And I don't want to leave you guys high and dry. But, or, hey, can you support me with this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great advice. Nuša, I want to bring you back in with your more kind of overview perspective. Do you have a sense of what kind of mistakes people sometimes make when they're trying to make that transition from side hustle to full-time?
Or the other way around?
Or, yeah, side hustle to full-time to full or full-time? Yeah.
So probably, I don't know, whether you call it mistake, but they're kind of going with they want to do it all and they want to do it all now, and they might do it too early. So both of our guests here said it felt right? And I was able to pay myself a bit of money, and then I had authority within the space. I think that's probably the considerations to kind of make. You need to be able to make a living, because otherwise you have an additional stress. And that's often why people don't quit their full-time job before they're cash flow positive and they can actually pay themselves a salary too, rather than just the people that they work with. So doing it too early and then holding on for too long, which I mentioned before, right? So from the perspective of, I could do it all and I'll do a bit of marketing and I'll do a bit of this, you can outsource stuff without giving away equity. And therefore, you are able to bring people in and get your balance in life. So I think that's probably the two biggest challenges and mistakes that people make. Right? One, quitting too early when the venture's not ready to take off because they don't have credibility within the industry yet. And then two, holding on as it takes really off, and maybe even sticking to the full-time job just to avoid the risk, right? Because the big problem is often the side hustle is the passion thing, the something I have to do that really empowers me. And then with the full-time job, that is where I belong, right? That is part of my identity too, and it enables me to do this thing. So that would be the two things I'd say kind of pop up the most. in terms of the businesses I worked with.
Nice, thank you. I want to ask our entrepreneurs, we do have a question here that sort of aligns. So what were the indicators with the startup that gave you the confidence to quit your full-time role other than profit generation? Was there something else? Or were you just, as Nuša says, you were like, oh, I can do this financially, time to make the leap? Or was there something else?
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
We definitely didn't have profit. We still don't actually have profit. We just had an idea, but I think for us, what gave us confidence was because, and this is, it's a different story than what Kristi has. I think it's great that we're both here to present a different perspective. This was an industry that Ben and I both spent our careers in more than a decade each. We had a number of relationships, and in Ben's case, he had been designing facilities for the very people who would become our customers later. He had those relationships. He was able to call them up and ask them about their views on this and whether they thought there was a gap, and hey, would this sound like something that might solve it? So we didn't, we took a leap, but we had a degree of confidence in our network and abilities, and that we had a deep understanding of the fact that there was going to be a need here. So it was less of a gamble from some perspectives. It was still a gamble, but there were a lot of things that were falling into place.
Got it. Okay. Kristi, did you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, I do think it's interesting because we've got a little bit of a different perspective, and that always brings up great conversation. So I'm a little bit more on the woo-woo side. So I will share that like a big part of, we were also not profitable. I should say that also, because that's a challenge of startups, especially I'm sure with Connor's business, there's a lot of R&D investment and stuff like that. With us, there's a lot of inventory, and that takes up a lot of capital. So no, we were not profitable, and no, I was not paying myself. But I think a couple of things. Number one, I started to notice that every extra hour I was spending on the business, it was having a really positive impact on the sales. I was starting to see qualitative feedback from customers. I love your products. I'm starting to see new customer adoption. I'm starting to look at a lot of metrics and stuff like that are leading metrics in the digital e-commerce world that are saying, yes, people want this product. We can't keep it in stock, like all those things. There's potential here. The second thing is I had a conversation with one of my good friends who I've known since I was 8, and she told me something very reassuring. She's like, you know what? If this doesn't work out, you can always go back to consulting. She's like, there's no shame in going back to corporate if this doesn't work out. And I think I felt like, what if I leap and this does not work out? And then I look like an idiot. Like I had a lot of judgment, I think, around that. So that was just hearing that. I've carried that with me actually a really, really long time. And then the third thing I would say, the more woo-woo thing, is I had to sit back and like ask myself, like, what do I really want to do with my life? Like, how do I really want to feel at the end of the day in my workday? Do I want to wake up or go to bed on Sunday night worried about having to catch a flight and do all these things? Like, do I want a different orientation in my life with my values? And the answer was yes. Like, we only get this one chance on this planet to live the life we have. And I put in a pretty good effort in my career. And I decided, you know what, for me, it was just the time internally to shift and do something that I felt like would have a really positive impact on the world. And that was my primary, I would say, motivator of all of those. But I did look at a bunch of different factors because I am very into analytics. So
Love it.
Wasn't all woo-woo. That's a really important point, I think, for all of us, no matter if we're entrepreneurs or not. But it does align with this question from Deborah, which I will put to both of you, both our entrepreneurs. Did you have naysayers or doubters along the way, and how did you handle that? Connor?
I think I had more people encouraging me than not. I definitely had people that were maybe more risk averse than me that were, pointing out all of the things that could go wrong and asking me if I really had thought this through. But I was very confident that I had thought it through. And one thing I'll just mention too, because it was related to the last question and this one. Because I knew I wanted to start a business before I had an idea, the mindset that I adopted was, my business right now is my personal finances, because that's what I can work on right now that will enable me to have a business when I have an idea. So for a number of years before I left Shell, I started by putting my family on a budget and getting very disciplined about saving money. And I had my finances modeled so that I actually knew exactly how many months of runway I had when I left Shell. It was 16 months. And it felt like that was a comfortable enough period that, like Kristi mentioned, if it didn't work out, I had to just finish the MBA and I was feeling confident about my employability. I felt that I was valuable to other organizations. If I needed to, I could go get another job, and 16 months was enough time to figure that out. So that was part of the risk equation for me too.
Okay, great. And it was enough? 16 months did the job?
Yeah, we started being able, by weeks, I think I was within a few $100s of maxing both lines of credits that I went to 2 separate banks and didn't tell them about each other, got lines of credits. This was how I made this 16-month runway. And I was within hundreds of dollars of that being maxed by the time the money I was bringing in from the business started being more than what was going out in my personal expenses. So it was very close, but I did make it.
Wow. I don't know if I could do that nerves wise. Kristi, you sound like you're a bit more conservative, maybe a bit more risk averse than Connor.
Well, I don't know, actually. I don't know. I thought I was, but then when I was thinking back to what I was doing and how I was paying myself, I was like, that was not a good situation, because I wasn't. So I guess the first part of the question, did I have naysayers? Yes, my entire family was against this. And I was say, like, it took years for them to be on board with this. Because again, like, I don't come from an entrepreneurial family. They think, well, actually, I have one entrepreneur in my family, but he's successfully bankrupted businesses. So I think they just have this perception that like entrepreneurs are wild cards. And, I come from very traditional professions, my parents. So they're very passionate about traditional career paths and stuff like that. So that was for sure. They were not in my corner. They were against it. And at some point I had to have a conversation with them and say, listen, you're either in or you're out, because right now I'm doubting myself. I don't need more people in my ear telling me how bad of an idea this is. So, eventually they came on board with it. My mom's super supportive of the business, as is my dad, but it did take some time. And I did have some friends. Like, I had one friend I remember who said, you're quitting your job. What are you going to do now? And I said, oh, run Encircled. It's my business. They're like, oh, I thought that was a hobby. And I'm like, oh no. So you will get these people when you're doing this, but that doesn't mean that you should not do it. So you have to be really confident in yourself and really have that self-belief to move forward. The one thing I will say on the financial side of things, so I did not pay myself when I quit my job. And I would warn people, once you quit your job, you get this like little rush of freedom, because you're like, hey, I don't work for anybody anymore. And I decided to go on like a 3-week surf trip, which you should not do when you're not paying yourself. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't afford this afterwards. So I had to like really change my lifestyle. And I did have some savings saved up. So I wasn't totally irresponsible, but I did have to change my lifestyle. I couldn't live where I lived before. I had to downsize my apartment. I had to change my habits. I couldn't go to the same restaurants I used to go to and stuff like that, because I wasn't paying myself and I didn't want to take on a lot of debt. So I had to make those short-term changes for the long-term prospect of being a full-time entrepreneur. And I also did start another side hustle to a side hustle. So I do have 2 companies, actually. So I have another company where I do coaching and consulting for e-commerce brands who are starting up. So I had started that at the time to also help fund me financially, because I am not the person who likes to run a huge line of credit. It gives me anxiety. But I applaud those who can, because I think it is necessary to take your business forward sometimes, to take those big leaps.
Wow, amazing, both of you. So such great and different stories. Connor.
It was actually another part of my equation too, Kristi. You just made me think of it. Another kind of risk mitigation that I had been thinking about was, if our product doesn't sell or we can't get that off the ground, between Ben and I, we thought we could add value consulting. And so we said, if we're really not hitting any strides, we'll try to bring consulting revenue into the company and do it that way. So that was just another layer of risk mitigation in my mind.
Right.
We didn't have to do that.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. Nuša, you're just sitting quietly nodding. Is there anything you want to weigh in on with your professorial hat?
Yeah, so it's really interesting to note that, you know, both of you really generated your second revenue stream, right? So, or had a plan B. I think that's a really important part. Funnily enough, I wouldn't want to encourage people to do that, but a big percentage of entrepreneurs actually does what Connor was just talking about. They find a line of credit or they bootstrap, right? Moms and dads and friends contribute before actually going either to raise funding, or sometimes, you know, depending on the business, they don't even need that. So a lot of times changing that lifestyle is what brings you kind of across to becoming a side hustle, becoming a full-time business. But it's, both of you talked about the risk aversion, right? And often we talk about entrepreneurs and side hustles becoming full-time things because people are risk takers. So I'm really thrilled to see that, you know, what we preach, plan for it, you know, mitigate your risk, identify a plan B and an additional revenue stream is something that really comes across in both of your stories that are so very different.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Thank you. Laura is asking us about time management. You've both kind of touched on this issue, but she says she's working full time with a busy home life, toddler, a puppy. Even though I'm passionate about my side hustle, I'm struggling to set the time aside. Anyone have advice for Laura? Someone unmute. Connor.
I'll jump in. There's no good answer to that. Because here's the thing that I was thinking about. If you feel that you don't have time for the side hustle and you're not, you know, the side hustle is going to be the not very busy part of your life. When you actually make the leap and you hire people and you start trying to build an organization, you're doing it full time. In my experience, that's actually been way busier than the period of my life where I had the side hustle. Because during the side hustle period, you can move at whatever pace you want. But once you're in full time, it's moving, and you're either keeping up with it and driving it forward, or you're not. And if you're not, then you're maybe going to fail. So time management is something that you need to learn that skill. And I would suggest go study an MBA, an executive MBA at Smith Business School, because you'll learn time management, because they put you into the meat grinder, and you have to. It's a skill that you just have to develop, and you need to be willing to make the sacrifices.
Great advice.
Yeah, I would say too, like, there's certain seasons of your life where doing things are just more challenging. I don't have kids myself, but I have had a puppy, and that is a whole thing. Oh my gosh. I got a puppy when I was full-time in my business, and it almost took me out. Nobody warns you how much. So I can't imagine, like, all of those things compounding. I am very productive, I think, and I'm passionate about time blocking and making sure you set aside that time as much as possible. And maybe if you want to continue and keep going with this, then maybe you need to lean on some friends and family to help you out during this situation, and see if maybe they can take the puppy for a little bit, so you can have some quiet, focused work time. But there are seasons in our life where it's just not possible to do that. And like Connor said, I'd like to say it gets better, but I don't know. Entrepreneurship is hard work. Like, it's long hours, but you know, the side effect is that it is so rewarding, for many, many reasons that we can go into later. But I would just say reach out for help and see if you can balance your schedule that way, and just be as focused as possible. Like, eliminate those distractions when you are working on something related to your business. Just make sure you're really clear and focused about what you want to do and when. Stay off social media. There's lots of distractions in our life that actually are sneaky, and they probably take time away from, you know, you already, that you can probably identify. Or maybe if you could take out that extra hour of TV or social media or whatever, you could use that on your business. So hopefully that helps.
I agree with Kristi. Great advice. I'm hyper focused on productivity to a point where that's actually my biggest source of anxiety. Is if I'm not productive, then I have anxiety. And I think you probably have to be to a degree. I'll give you an example. Social media is a good one. I ended up finding that I was wasting time on social media. So I set a 4-minute timer on Instagram. I get 4 minutes a day on Instagram, and then it shuts down and I can't get any more. And that's that's one of the ways that I have 10 extra minutes or 30 extra minutes every day because of that.
That's fantastic advice. Whoa, I might need that too. Actually, somebody asked a question about social media, and maybe this is a better question for you, Kristi, about building your brand in a social platform without sort of gaining too much attention before you were ready, but also kind of trying to build the brand. Like, how did you strike that balance?
Yeah, so I guess the question's more about like showing yourself on social, maybe. Yeah, so again,
your audience was there, right? That's where you were probably trying to get people.
I actually started my social media and my Instagram for Encircled before we even launched the product. And I always advise people to do that, just to pre-build an audience. It's so difficult nowadays to do organic social engagement and growth. So starting earlier is better. If you're not comfortable with showing your face on social media because you think it's going to like out you to your employer or whatever, that you're on social doing this thing, again, like there's lots of ways around that. There's ways to create videos and social posts that don't even involve like your face. Reels are really popular today. There's tons of ideas for doing that where you don't even need to be in the video. There's tools like later.com, Planoly, which are scheduling tools for social media so that you can sit on a Saturday and schedule your full week of social media posts. And then you don't have to be on your phone at work, on your lunch break trying to post that thing on social media or whatever. There's ways, I think, of working around it with tools and systems that can optimize, your efficiency and pre-schedule and batch stuff as much as possible so that you're not, you don't want to be like posting an Instagram story while you're in an important work meeting or something like that. Because then I think you're just opening yourself up to like trouble later on. And like Connor identified earlier, those relationships are really key. Even though I'm not in that space anymore, like these people are my colleagues, my former colleagues are buying my product and referring me to their friends and family. Like, you want to leave like really strong relationships in your wake, whatever you're doing, and be respectful. So yeah, that would be my best advice.
That's great. Connor, did you want to weigh in? It may not be as relevant for your audience. I don't know.
So we're a B2B company, and LinkedIn is actually a big part of our brand building. And, it was free in the beginning. We spent a lot of attention on LinkedIn. It's paid off hugely. The amount of times that people approach me and say, hey, like colleagues or old friends or whatever, and say, hey, I've been watching you on LinkedIn. And so we've got over 5,000 followers on there now, which is good in our space. And the time we've invested in that has been really paid off in big way.
And when did you decide to start promoting yourself there? Was that when you made that leap on the parental leave, or did you have that going ahead of time, or what was your timing?
We registered a website domain name in probably late 2018. So it would have been a quarter or two before I left Shell, and set it all up then and started to write blog posts and talk about, what's coming. And I don't think we really had our faces on there or anything like that.
Okay. So the question was about, should I wait or should I launch right in? So you guys are both saying just start, get it.
It's an easy thing you can do to start building traction and testing the market.
Right. Okay. Good advice.
Can I just say, it would be interesting to explore yourself as a brand as well, right? So from the perspective as you're building your side hustle and exploring how to enter the market, and here we have two very different experiences, kind of B2C, B2B environments, positioning yourself as a brand, and even on LinkedIn as a professional, it gives you additional credibility, right? And therefore it makes your network's going to support you one way or another. And even though they're your biggest critic, they're also your biggest supporter and they cheer you on. But as you build the credibility around everything, it also, you become the driver of that as a person, and it makes it kind of more straightforward. So I would say from the perspective of a side hustle, it's probably sooner rather than later. And you want to build that early adopters, right? People that are willing to try it, even though I'm going to call it the bug, even though it may have a bug, or maybe with, Kristi's business, the suing isn't quite perfect just yet, or because they will be supporting you because they were with you and they believe your story early on. So social media in both cases, really important. It's just a tool that it's there. And the other piece, you don't really need to be attached to all of it, right? The planning tools that Kristi mentioned, there's a variety of them for scheduling, for planning. and also for kind of putting out social media campaigns. So just really making use of that. And they don't come really at a cost, right? Some of them are actually available for you for free.
Okay, great advice. Actually, and I was going to say, so we do have a comment and a question from Chelsea, which is love the stories and discussions from the session. Lots of good insights and learnings. Any recommendations of any good resources or communities to be part of to get coaching or support, or even to find fellow entrepreneurs and potential future co-founders? It's pretty broad. Anyone have anything on top of their mind they want to recommend for Chelsea?
There are a remarkable number of resources. This was something that was a learning to me, that I was astounded by how big of an ecosystem exists to help entrepreneurs take their business to the next level. So it's going to depend on your industry, your geography, and a whole bunch of other things. But there's a number of government programs. There's a number of accelerators or incubators. There's courses that incubators put on and workshops. There's organizations that exist that are just groups of mentors that help people. I could go on. There's funding and all kinds of stuff. And I think it depends on where you are and what you're doing.
Great. Thank you, Connor.
Sign up for the mailing lists. Do a Google search and get on the mailing lists of any entrepreneurial related organization in your geography, and then just show up at their events, because you meet people and it becomes, you get the network effect, and you tell somebody what you're trying to do and they say, oh, I know somebody who can help you with that. And so that's actually one thing that you can do early on in taking action on an idea, is sign up for those mailing lists and go to the events, because you're going to meet people and you're going to start organically. Things are going to happen.
Great advice. Anyone else?
I was going to suggest Next Canada, if you're in Canada. It's a founder kind of accelerator type of deal. They have different levels of engagement and I think they're category agnostic. So any business, but they're a great community to learn and be educated, and also like concept test your business depending on what stage you're in. A lot of the universities as well and colleges will have like accelerator programs that are available as well that you can apply for. But I agree with Connor. I think having community is so important, especially if you feel like you're coming from a path where none of your friends are entrepreneurs, which was my situation at the time. Your family does not agree with what you're doing. You need those people in your corner cheering you on. And chances are most of them are experiencing the exact same thing. Like one of my best friends today, I met through a Twitter introduction 8 years ago. She lives in Toronto and she's in a totally different industry than me, but we have a lot of synergies in terms of the challenges we face in our business even today. So I really encourage people to get out there and you can do meetups and stuff like that. There's lots of Facebook groups out there for entrepreneurs, depending on your industry, and local stuff is happening again, which is great. So there's lots of opportunities just to put yourself out there, and you never know what connection is going to come from it.
And you can do all of that while still holding down a full-time job.
Totally.
Got it. And Nuša, short of signing up for the Masters of Management Innovation Entrepreneurship program at Smith School of Business, any other advice for people?
Yeah, so one is totally sign up. I can totally live with an MBA or an accelerated MBA as well. So Smith School of Business has a variety of resources available as well, and Queen's University too, right? So Dunin Deshpande Innovation Center, for example, has an incubator, a summer innovation initiative where you could sign up and look into meeting co-founders, growing your idea. Q Your Venture is another option. More kind of Canada-wide, Innovation Canada provides a benefits finder. So you actually are able to put in the industry you're interested in, what you're doing. They even have women initiatives, so you can find different grants and areas of funding through that. So Innovation Canada, another resource. And then you have angel networks, right, as a starting point, potentially, that building the network, but also looking at where you might find potential supporters for your venture. So there's a variety of places to kind of look for, but I think networking, like Connor and Kristi said, the key thing, right? Find people that can work with you and can, one, cheer you on, but at the same time can support you within the space. to help you get to where you want to get to.
Great advice. Thank you, Nuša. I want to get to this question from Eric because I think it's a really interesting one. In terms of the bottom line, once shifts in income, free time, and well-being are accounted for, could you provide a figure in terms of your betterment stemming from having had a side hustle? I think that's a really interesting question. Connor, Kristi, are you able to help him out?
Yeah, I can. My figure is infinity. Because I'm living my dream in terms of what I've always wanted to do. I'm doing it, and that there's no amount of value that you can put on that.
Very easy answer. Thank you. Kristi?
Yeah, I mean, I think doing the side hustle and having a full-time job enabled me to get to where I am today. I don't think, at least at the stage and timing that I was doing that, like the amount of accelerators and programs and the gig economy, all those things were just kind of getting started. So it wasn't where it is today. So there's a lot more options for funding and stuff like that that were not available. So, you know, I don't think I'd be sitting in this seat today if I didn't have the side hustle. So, and then the betterment factor, I guess, all of us are living the dream of eventually selling our business. So we're still operators, obviously, of the business, but that's usually the goal for most of us, either to exit at some point. So yeah, it's infinite possibilities for sure.
Fantastic. I know, Nuša, you don't want to, that's too specific, I guess, for your needs there.
No, I would just say, I think the infinity piece works really well, right? Because as long as you're living your passion, you're getting the thing in return. And as long as you can make a living that you kind of signed up for, right, that is good enough for you and your lifestyle and your family, I think you should be fine. So I would go with infinity. And I think I might use that in my future courses as well with Connor and Kristi.
There we go. I want to get to this question from Amit because Amit deserves a special shout out saying, I am based in Melbourne, Australia, woke up very early to join. And then Amit says, how much of a social life should one give up? Is there a balance to this? Or should one be willing to withdraw from society in order to make the side hustle work? Nuša says, no, Amit, no.
No, absolutely not. Because actually my view, and again, I have lived all my life in a corporate space, but I've worked with side hustlers and then growing entrepreneurs. That social piece actually is what keeps you going, right? And a lot of it you can transition into what you're needing to do. So you might just tailor the social part towards maybe the needs you have within the business, and you're expanding that network as you're doing it. But by no means, and I think we need to bust this myth, and Connor and Kristi, I'm hoping that you can help me with this one. Yes, we work 60, 70 hours in a week, but actually having a life outside of that is as important for the hustle as it is for yourself as well. So for me, I would say don't give up your social life, just plan better so you can fit everything you want to do into that.
Plan better. Okay. Kristi, Connor?
I mean, yes, I agree with all of that. You should not become a recluse for sure. And I love this question so much. But you have to give up some stuff. That's just the reality. So there's seasons of hustle, I think, a little bit. Where you just can't fit in everything because like you don't have infinite time in the day. So if you want to do your workout, you want to eat healthy and do all this stuff, at some point you have to optimize something there or like outsource it or whatever, if that looks possible for you financially in your life, like cooking meals or something like that. But at the end of the day, we need to still be healthy and maintain that somewhat balanced approach with like social life. I did try to get my friends to help me a lot with my business. So, you know, originally I was fulfilling orders. I was on condo. So I'd be like, come on over, I'll buy you pizza. But I did like disappear. Like even when I did my accelerated MBA at Queens, like I was working full time doing that program. It's a part-time program. You know, some of my friends didn't see me for a bit during that program because it is intense. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of structured work that you have to complete over a certain time. And then you have a full-time job on top of it. It's totally manageable with good time management, but it does put pressure on different areas of your life. So you do have to make some difficult decisions, I've just found. But it's important to maintain friendships. You know, connection is super important to joy in life. So I respect that a lot. And, but I do think you have to be really mindful of, you know, your time management again, and also not sacrificing other things that are also important to your health and well-being at the same time.
Yeah, great advice. I feel like everybody should put that infinity symbol and then their giant calendar. Be like, it's infinity potential, and here's my time management plan. Connor, did you want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is different for every person, because it's kind of about where do you get your energy and how do you, stay mentally healthy. And some people that's exercise, some people that's social activity, and some people that's family. But there is no doubt that you're going to have to make sacrifices. And my example is, I used to ski 20 days a winter, and now I'm lucky to do one. And I used to ski or golf 20 times a summer, and now I'm lucky to do one. But I don't compromise on the time I spend with my family. I spend every morning with my kids, and I spend every dinner and bedtime with my kids, and I spend one weekend day with my family. And I rarely ever compromise on that.
Right. So making sure your life aligns with your values, it sounds like you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're almost out of time. Can everybody give me kind of a 1 minute last takeaway for our audience as they go back into their lives and their side hustles, and they're juggling those schedules, and they're trying to remember the infinity possibilities? Any final takeaways, Nuša?
So for me, it's just really plan for it. Do something you love doing. So a side hustle should be something that really fulfills what you're wanting to do. And don't give up too much of your life for it, just because you need to manage not burning out, because you're no good to anybody, not your side hustle either, if you don't take care of yourself. So for me, planning, really key. Taking care of yourself, really key. Asking for help. That is probably where side hustlers sometimes fall short. Really asking for help, because people are there for you, either in your network personally or within the space that you operate when. That would be my main piece of advice. Really take care of yourself and follow the passion.
Super. That's great. Kristi?
Yeah, I would say, definitely align your life with your values. I think that's been like a common theme here. So set up your life for your success, and make sure that when you're pursuing a business idea or a side hustle, that it's something you truly love and feel passionate about, because you are going to live and breathe this idea for probably the next 5 to 10 years of your life. So you better be passionate about it. It shouldn't be, I can make socks online by drop shipping them for like $10,000 a month, just easy, quick. Whatever. It has to be something that you feel really strongly about, because one of the biggest differentiators I've seen with entrepreneurs who are successful is persistence and hard work and not giving up. And that is so important, because it is a bumpy ride. It's not a hockey stick up to the right for everybody. So just know that you're not doing it wrong. If you feel like you're spinning in circles and going backwards and forwards, that's just entrepreneurship, and just keep going.
Fantastic. Do you still wear that garment that you...
I do. I'm not wearing it today, but I still have it. Yeah. It's still in our collection too.
Connor, a quick minute?
I have 3, and these are going to be different for everybody, but these are the ones that were right for me. In hindsight, I'm glad that I did something that was in my domain of expertise, because it really helped us to fast track the process, because we had relationships, we were able to establish trust, we had credibility. That made a big difference. It would be a much harder slog if you were just saying, let's choose a whole other industry I've never been a part of. 2, I would say find a partner that complements your weaknesses or your gaps in expertise. I had would not have been able to do it obviously without Ben, but we worked very well together, and we tended to think in different ways. So we had a lot of really good debates and fights that got us to the right place on a lot of issues. And that was extremely valuable to move forward. And the last one was, don't feel like you need to start with a small idea. One thing when we were starting out was, should we just start out by selling things on Amazon, buying them from Alibaba and selling them on Amazon, so we learn about business? I'm really glad we didn't do that. And we went after the thing that we thought was the best thing, because you learn so much when you're doing it. And as long as you're somebody who is willing to put the work in and can learn, then I don't think you need to limit yourself to something small to begin with.
Okay, fantastic. That's great advice. Thank you. I know some of you have to run, but if you bear with me, I have to do a very quick extra. So if you need to run, just slide away, but I'll thank you formally in a moment. For our audience, I want to tell you all about some learning opportunities through Queen's Executive Education. Strategic Planning and Leading Change is a practical program that will be delivered virtually over 4 half days in November. You're not only going to learn how to recognize the need for change in your organization, but you're also going to learn how to form and deliver an effective change strategy. You can visit smithqueens.com/execed for more about that. Now, for the entrepreneurs out there, I want to let you know about the Upstart Venture Challenge, which is a $60,000 pitch competition open to Queen's faculty, staff, students, and alumni. Applications are due on Friday, November 11th. So I encourage you. The slide was just up there. It's going to come back in a second, maybe. But I encourage you to visit smithqueens.com/upstart. There's the slide for more information about that pitch competition. And finally, we have another free webinar coming to you next month. In November, we're going to be talking about blockchain, what it is, how it works, and how it's being used in the business world. Don't miss that. You'll be getting information about that coming up in your inbox very shortly. It's happening on November 15th. Nuša, Kristi, Connor, thank you so much. I believe we lost our 2 entrepreneurs. They literally scheduled their meetings back to back. So I do want to thank them for their time and their insights today. Really fantastic. Nuša, thank you also for your insights as a member of our faculty at Smith. It's really fantastic to have you. From Smith School of Business at Queen's, thank you to everyone for joining. Sorry for not getting to your questions. They were great. There were too many. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone.